Okay, let's get into this. With us today, we have the author of Do You Speak Football, French football writer and broadcaster Tom Williams, as well as the Athletics' Carl Anka, who's also an author as well. Let's not forget. Right, let's get into Kylian Mbappe. Tom, look, can you just be honest with me? And I don't think I'm wrong in saying or echoing the thoughts of many football fans here. Is he actually going to leave Paris Saint-Germain this time around?
Well, no, he is. Obviously, it hasn't yet been officially announced, but the club have confirmed it to the journalists who they speak to. And I think the most telling thing is that Mbappe himself has not denied the news, and the club hasn't either. So what is happening at the moment is they will be talking about how to officially announce things, and I'm sure that when that time comes, it will all be done very slickly with some kind of social media video or something. But I mean, we have been here so many times before with Mbappe when he has seemed destined to leave, and we've all been convinced that he was about to leave, only for him to stay. But this time, I think it really is it. I mean, obviously, never rule things out in football, as the cliche goes. But yeah, I think this is it.
Carl, just before we started the pod, we were thinking of potential destinations, and yet again, nothing's been confirmed. But Real Madrid seem like they've potentially, maybe, kind of got their man.
Potentially, maybe, kind of, sort of, footnote one, asterisk. This is very tiresome, isn't it, Tom? Right? We've been doing
Yeah.
this pretty since the day Kylian Mbappe won the World Cup.
Mm.
We've been talking about when he's going to join Real Madrid. He was likened to the original Brazilian phenomenon, Ronaldo, and Ronaldo played for Real as well as Barcelona and whatnot. And it was always this story of he's got the World Cup, he's going to get the Champions League one day, then he's going to get the Ballon d'Ors, and then he's going to become one of the greatest players of all time. And we've been stuck in this holding pattern of him at PSG for a while,
Mm.
and this will they, won't they, to and fro, tic tac, tic tac. Um, just hilarious things on the Antugutos Jogones. My apologies for the pronunciation there, where they spent basically an entire summer saying Mbappe is coming, only for him to not come. It felt tired and drawn out. We're in this weird holding pattern, and even now we're talking, saying maybe he's going to leave PSG. But I think the thing with Mbappe is there is always more money. And that feels horrible to say, but I got the sense in the last contract extension, the 2 year bonus, which was just Mbappe very much seemed like he was going to go Real Madrid, and then PSG right at the last minute offered him life-changing generational money, not just for him but his entire family. And I think we're in that situation again where it looks as if he is gone, and it looks as if everything's been teed up, waiting for him to go to Real Madrid. Okay, is he going to play the number nine? Whatever. But there's always the case that PSG or another club somewhere could offer Kylian Mbappe what I can only describe as a dump truck full of money, and he changes his mind.
Yeah, Tom, how credible is this Real Madrid conversation? And also, could this deal be hijacked? Because, I mean, we do know that Saudi Arabia did come calling at some point, which Mbappe didn't take the offer up. But could there be any hijackers of this potential deal?
I mean, there could be theoretically, but I would
Mm.
be extremely surprised if the summer doesn't end with Mbappe standing on the pitch at the Bernabeu with a white shirt in his hands. As Carl said, there has been a relationship between Mbappe and his family and Real Madrid since he was a teenager. He has had multiple opportunities to join them in the past. He's
Mm.
made no secret of his admiration for Madrid as a club, of his desire to one day play there. And I think just within the sort of wider football ecosystem, there has long been a feeling that at some point he will go to Madrid, and it has occasionally seemed that the planets were aligning for that to happen. Most notably in 2022, and it didn't happen. But now it feels like this is the moment, and I think the fact that Madrid had their fingers burnt the last time they got this close
Mm.
means that were the deal not to go, were the deal not to go through now, I think we'd probably be looking at a point of no return in terms of Mbappe's relationship with, with Florentino Pérez, with the directors at Madrid, and with Madrid's fans, because, Madrid's fans did not take kindly to having Mbappe flutter his eyelashes at them for so long, and particularly in that summer of 2022, only to then stay at PSG. And, the kind of initial reaction from a lot of Madrid fans was real anger. You don't do this to a club like Real Madrid. Who does he think he is? He can stay at PSG and he can rot in Ligue 1 for all we care. So water has had to pass beneath the bridge for us to get to this point now, where we are coming up to 2 years on from that, and people are prepared to forgive and forget. As ever, there will be negotiations about his salary, about his signing on fee, about bonuses, image rights in particular, which we know is something that Mbappe is particularly punctilious about. He's had he was the guy who basically decided that the France squad were no longer just going to go along to every commercial engagement that the French Football Federation asked them to show up for, if they weren't happy with the whatever it was that they were flogging. So this is someone who thinks a lot about his image and how it's used. So there'll be a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through, and if things stall, of course there will be interest from other clubs. Of course, the Saudis would love to have Kylian Mbappe. There are big clubs in England who have the means to sign a player like Mbappe. We know he's going to be paid less at Madrid than he was at PSG, so it's a bit of a step down for him salary wise. And does that mean that other clubs would find it easier to afford him? There's no transfer fee, of course. So there's always that possibility that things break down. But these two entities, Mbappe and Real Madrid, have been slowly moving towards each other for years, and this does feel like this is when it's going to happen.
Tom, I particularly love that word, punctilious. I'm putting that one in the pocket. That's
good,
absolute gem. Absolute gem of a word.
I once got ripped by a bunch of guys I used to play football with in Paris, because I was complaining about a referee that we had, and I described him as punctilious, because he was punctilious. He was getting his whistling for everything, and every time I now need a word that describes someone like that, the punctilious is just the one that springs to mind. So it's
athletic listeners, put that one in your pocket. You will sound very intelligent with that word, trust me. Right, Carl, I mean, is there an idea that as long as we've been waiting for this story to land, or whether or not he was leaving PSG, that actually the player himself has outgrown this project? You look at the likes of Messi leaving, you look at the likes of the Galacticos, as to say, leaving. I mean, continuously, he is the club's top scorer, top goal scorer amongst Europe's top 5 leagues, 25 goals this season in 27 games, 21 already in Ligue 41 goals in all competitions last season. Let's not forget the madness he did at the World Cup final. I mean, is this a conversation around the Ballon d'Or, perhaps? Or can he still earn that at PSG? Because there've only been 2 in the history of the French League that have won the Ballon d'Or.
I think it's interesting you call it a project rather than a football club in your question there. And this is what is really difficult to describe this, because Paris Saint-Germain are not a conventional football club in the same way Brighton are, or in the same way Accrington Stanley are right now. This is a hugely well-moneyed club that is tied to the heart and soul of one of the greatest footballing hotbeds in the world. They're in the middle of a very intriguing legal battle with the Paris Council over the Parc des Princes, over their stadium, where they will either leave their stadium perhaps in the next couple of years and build an entirely new one, or they might continually renovate the stadium that they don't properly own. And then you've got Kylian Mbappe, who, I mean, if I'm perfectly honest with you, he's not a football player anymore, right? He is a global entity on par with an Olympics, or on par with a World Cup. You talk about Real Madrid having their fingers burnt, Tom. That event and the whole spectacle leading up to it was similar to when multiple nations try and get a World Cup bid, right? So Kylian Mbappe now is so expensive as a football player that only a few nations can have him, much like hosting a World Cup or Olympics. There are huge questions over tax and wages and image rates and endorsement deals, much like an Olympics or a World Cup. There's conversation about possibly going to Saudi Arabia, much like the Olympics or a World Cup, right? It's I find it really hard to describe these things as projects because they're so vast in their scale. And Paris Saint-Germain went off and got Kylian first on a loan, but then on a 100 million plus deal from Monaco because he was going to be our centerpiece of this project to PSG, and the idea was to win a Champions League, and if they win the Champions League, they become a more legitimate footballing enterprise in the same way that Chelsea took about a decade to win the Champions League. Manchester City took about a decade after their investment to win a Champions League. We're now seeing Newcastle in their chase to go win a Champions League or do well in the Champions League. This is what clubs with foreign investors, often with oil money, shall we say, do when they eventually make that rise is, okay, we to now become an old money football club or historic football club in the same way as Real Madrid, in the same way as Bayern Munich, in the same way as other powers, we have to go and win a Champions League or two or three. And with Mbappe, it didn't work out. You had the final against Bayern Munich where they came close with Neymar. You had the Messi experiment, which didn't work because your front three just didn't press. And then you had what this experiment is, in where Mbappe is now the captain. He's the centerpiece of a team. I don't use the word indulged, but the team now works to get the most out of him because he's not having to play with his back towards goal because there's Gonçalo Ramos there, there's Randall Kolo Muani there. The team is better balanced than it was previously. So this is Mbappe's team this season, and yet he's still gone, nah. It's not, the things I want aren't going to happen here. And I don't see how PSG fix that unless they essentially win the Champions League this season and then make grand overtures as to how they're going to go back to back or three times in a row. I think that's difficult. Mbappe is the best football player in the French league. He's probably the best football player in most leagues in the world. But also he's so expensive that he seems on a very fixed trajectory. That means he has to go to one of these old money clubs, historic clubs like Real Madrid. Barcelona can't afford him due to their financial situation. And the Premier League is the Premier League. And I'm not sure if Mbappe wants that mess right now.
Well, that brings me back to personal ambition, Tom. I think about the Ballon d'Or as a player. He's been nominated, I think, 6 times for the Ballon d'Or. And Real Madrid, Spain, actually, La Liga historically has 24 Ballon d'Or winners in history with 2 clubs, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Carl talks about old establishments, old money. I mean, the best shop window, you could say, is Real Madrid, but then you've got Vinicius Jr., you've got Jude Bellingham as well, which kind of complicates things a little bit. But in terms of his personal ambition, is it time to move on?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, when we are talking about players on Mbappe's level, and there aren't that many players in that category, but we inevitably frame things with regard to the Ballon d'Or, and it's clearly easier to win the Ballon d'Or if you're playing for one of the Spanish superpowers or for one of the big Premier League clubs, or perhaps for Bayern Munich, for clubs that are competing for the Champions League. That said, I think if France win the last World Cup, Mbappe almost certainly wins the Ballon d'Or off the back of it. I don't think Messi wins it if Argentina don't win it. And, France are this close to winning it. If Randall Kolo Muani's shot isn't saved by Emi Martinez in stoppage time, if the penalty shootout goes a different way, then Kylian Mbappe is a 2-time world champion at the age of 23, having scored the first hat-trick in the final since Geoff Hurst in 1966. And I think he would have been a shoo-in for the Ballon d'Or. So, you can conceivably win the Ballon d'Or while still playing in Ligue, but it's not all that straightforward. And I think for him to win it in a non-major tournament year, or for him to win it for something that he doesn't do in the colours of his national team, he has to win the Champions League. And chances are he isn't going to do that with PSG, although he came extremely close in 2020. And he will have a better chance of doing that at Real Madrid. I think for him, you go back to 2022 when it looked like he was going to leave. It would have made sense, I think, if he'd left at that point. And his decision to stay was because I think he felt that he hadn't embellished his legacy in France as much as he thought he might be able to by staying, which is what he's done over the last 2 years. He's now PSG's all-time top scorer. He's heading for a 6th league title with PSG this season, 7th in total if you had the one he won with Monaco. And he's sort of cemented his place in sort of the pantheon of Ligue and greats. But Champions League success is the main driver in his career now, because that's what opens the door to the Ballon d'Or. And he came close in 2020. PSG haven't come anywhere near as close since then. They probably aren't going to go close this season, because the squad has been so completely remodeled since last summer, and it is in the early throes of this new project, which is all about young, hungry, more French players. So that they're not really one of the main contenders this season. So that's why he's decided to go. And let's face it, the only thing he hasn't achieved at PSG is winning the Champions League, and that's probably not going to happen this season. So if he were to stick around, what's he going to do? Win a few more French league titles, win a few more top scorer awards. I mean, that's all great, but as with a lot of the modern greats in all sorts of different sports, they have a very clear idea of their legacy, and what they need to do in order to be considered an all-time great. And it is a logical step at this stage of his career for him to want to leave Paris at long last and go to Madrid.
Tom,
Yeah, still.
do you think PSG have indulged Mbappe too much in recent years?
I think what happened in 2022 was pretty remarkable in terms of the size of the contract that they gave him and the amount of power he was given. We still don't know exactly what that looked like, or what it looks like day to day.
Sporting influence.
We know that sporting influence. Yeah, well, I mean, Luis Campos being brought in, that was clearly done to appease Mbappe, because he knew him from his time at Monaco, and he's had a relationship with Campos for years. And if you look at where things were in 2022 and where they are now, 2022, he's sharing the spotlight with Neymar and Messi, albeit he is very much the main man already at that point. Whereas as of last summer, Messi and Neymar both leave. He is the only star in town, and the team is basically built for him. And the unfortunate thing for Mbappe, I think, is that he joined the club at a time when the focus had shifted from domestic dominance to we must win the Champions League. And so his entire time at PSG has been viewed through that prism of this quest for the Champions League. And it is a quest that looks destined not to end in success, at least during Mbappe's time at the club. So yeah,
that's a good sound. That sounds enough.
To be honest,
you stretched that out. You stretched that one out.
That is the most articulate sound that I could find to respond to your question. Because I mean, yeah, that's kind of what it is.
Well, let's move on. Because there will be a huge void left from the departure of Kylian Mbappe. Let's get the boring stuff out of the way first, Tom. FFP, right? PSG has spent a lot of money rebuilding this squad with a different sort of talent profile. What kind of approaches in the transfer market are we looking at with sort of FFP in place for PSG coming up once Mbappe leaves?
Well, PSG have to be very careful because they were punished by UEFA for financial fair play infringements in September 2022. They were given a 65 million euro fine, I think it was, with
slap on the wrist.
Slap on the wrist. And they only paid 10 million euros up front. The rest of it was suspended. And they, well, I mean, who knows? So basically,
it's another.
But I mean, this was part of a suite of punishments that UEFA announced for a whole host of clubs. PSG, both Milan clubs, Juventus, I think Monaco, Marseille, Besiktas, they all had their wrists slapped at the same time. And the agreement with PSG was that they agreed a 3-year settlement, which means that for the 3 seasons following that announcement, PSG had to commit to breaking even. And that period runs until, I think I'm right in saying 2026. And if PSG fail to comply with the terms of that settlement, they will open themselves to further punishments, which could, I mean, if it's a fine, it'll be a slap on the wrist, but UEFA can theoretically impose limits on the size of their squad in European competition, their ability to register new players. They could theoretically be kicked out of the Champions League. So they have that threat hanging over them. At the same time, on the sort of the financial side of things, PSG are in a very healthy position currently. Last summer they spent a lot of money on new players, 300 million euros plus, but they made more money from player sales than I think they ever have. They sold Neymar, they sold Marco Verratti, Julian Draxler. They got a lot of huge salaries off the books as well. Neymar's salary, Messi's salary, Sergio Ramos's salary, Verratti's salary, Draxler's salary. Mbappe's salary is going to be off the books. And, there's talk of that being a 200 million euro difference in the PSG accounts. Last month, they announced record revenues for 2022-23, 800 million euros plus for the first time. I think they were third in the Deloitte Money League behind Real Madrid and Man City. They're looking at a similar level of revenue for the current season, 23-24. So that, and commercially, PSG are enjoying huge success. There is a more long-term question about how Mbappe's departure will affect that. But for the time being, PSG's commercial operation is very successful. So on the one hand, there's a lot of money there. And on the other hand, you've got the threat of potential FFP sanctions. So I think if PSG decide they want to spend big, I think they probably could. I think if they want to sign a sort of figurehead kind of Mbappe replacement in inverted commas, I suspect they will be able to find the money to do that. But there is, this is not 2017 where PSG will just throw caution to the wind and kind of do whatever the hell they want. That they have had their wrists slapped. So yeah, there is a caveat to the amount of money they have available.
Carl, what does that figurehead signing look like then? Victor Osimhen, perhaps? I mean,
okay. So we peek behind the curtain at the Athletic. I was going about my day last week, and I get a Slack notification from one of the big bosses going, "Hello, all of you writers. Make the argument as to which player PSG should buy. Should it be Osimhen? Should it be Salah? Should it be Vinny Jr.? Should it be this one, that one? Loads of showbiz names." And there was palpable crickets for about 10 minutes. And then I raised my hand in the back and I went, can I be an oink and say they shouldn't buy a striker, they should probably buy a defender? To which we had a piece on the Athletic, you can read it now, where we had arguments for Osimhen, we had arguments for Mohamed Salah, but I made the argument that they didn't actually need an attacking player. I think Bradley Barcola is the future of PSG on the left wing. I think Ousmane Dembele has the right wing sorted out. I think they've got Gonzalo Ramos, Kolo Muani up front. You've also got Hugo Ekitike, who's on loan as well. Xavi Simons is on loan.
Xavi Simons, yeah.
RB Leipzig, he can come back. He can play as a number 10 and on the right wing as well. My apologies to everyone listening. I've got any of those pronunciations wrong. But in my opinion, PSG are thoroughly stacked in the attacking positions. That's not the problem. The problem is, I watched them play in the Champions League last week, and I went, ooh, that centre-back partnership is not it. Marquinhos and Skriniar, they're not a Champions League winning centre-back partnership, in my opinion. Danilo Pereira is now 32 years of age, and he can't be relied to play top-level football week in, week out, especially in those Champions League games. They need bolstering in central midfield. They need a ball-carrying midfielder from deep, I believe. And they absolutely, positively need upgrades at centre-back. So my argument in the piece you can read on the Athletic was Bayern Munich's situation is a little bit fluid, but I still think very, very highly of Matthijs de Ligt. And I think, okay, he didn't do well at Juventus and didn't quite doing well at Bayern Munich, but what's one more extra super club to your CV? So I made the argument that Matthijs de Ligt could be a good addition. I think I still think on his day he's a fantastic ball carrying centre back. I think okay, he's not rapid, he's not hyper mobile, but
But with the right coaching, though, think about
with
it.
the right
Luis
coaching and the
Enrique.
right system with Luis Enrique, you don't have to run too much when you're defending if you can also use possession as a defensive tool. And I think he was slotting very, very well at Paris Saint-Germain. Liam Thum made the argument that Frankie de Jong would also work. And then we had a back and forth about which other Ajax players could fit in there as well. So I don't think PSG need to make a big showbiz Mbappe level signing. I think what they need to do is double down on what they're currently doing. Young players, preferably French or Parisian, to build that narrative around them right now. If you do want to get a striker, I'm gonna be really annoying here. I'm sorry, Newcastle fans, but Alexander Isak would fit in very nicely. Paris Saint-Germain. I don't know how that negotiation would go between Newcastle and Paris Saint-Germain there, but I don't. I think going out to get Mohamed Salah, or going out to get Victor Osimhen, or going out even to get someone like Rafael Leao would just be. It would be a bit like when one of my dad's friends buys a supercar and gets a tattoo after a breakup.
Midlife crisis.
You said it, not me. I'm just
Reading between the lines. Reading between the lines.
Someone said it.
And since we're talking about Ramos and Kolo Muani, if PSG is serious about this shift in their approach and this move away from the bling bling culture, from the superstar signings, as Carl said, they probably shouldn't sign anyone because they have the means already to align a very impressive looking front three, even without Mbappe. It's true that Kolo Muani and Ramos have both, taken time to find their feet, and it hasn't helped that neither of them have been starting games of late. But on paper, at least, if you want a sort of young, hungry, all French front line, then you play Barcola and Dembele and Kolo Muani together, and you give them the time to strike up some kind of understanding. And that would be, that would also be a great way of showing that the superstar era is over. That they're not going to try and replace Mbappe. They're going to use the players they already have. Okay, these aren't guys who've come out of the youth team. These are guys that they've spent big money on, but it's. I think PSG have an opportunity to show that they're really serious about not just going after superstars, but then at the same time, when a big club loses a player with that kind of profile, that sense that they need replacing is always very prevalent, and there's usually a desire from supporters to see that the club are serious about signing a replacement. So I suspect PSG probably will look to make a big name attacking signing, even though with the players they have already, they've certainly got enough firepower to win Liga at least. And there's the potential there for a really interesting forward line that could go on and achieve great things in Europe as well.
Yep. Carl, what about, someone like Gavi de Jong, someone to make that sort of midfield tick as well, And we've seen the influence of someone like Declan Rice at Arsenal, so that ball carrying sort of defensive midfielder. Another one to add to the list?
Possibly. So again, watching the Champions League last week, Samuel Ugarte, look, you want someone to win the ball and make tackles. He's your man. But I think PSG will probably need someone next to him to help with the carries and whatnot. The unfortunate thing for PSG, to my mind, is if you are going to buy a non-striker, a lot of the premium players have moved. So, we're talking now, I said they probably improved by a centre-back. I think the best centre-back to improve PSG already went last summer. So that's Kim to Bayern Munich. And I think quite a few clubs are kicking themselves that they didn't get Kim and got let Bayern get there. I think we've seen in the Premier League a boom of these hybrid 6-8 box-to-box holding pivots. So Declan Rice went for a lot of money. Enzo Fernandez went for a lot of money. Moses Caicedo went for a lot of money. So that'll be difficult as well. De Jong makes sense theoretically. His weakness is he's not a single pivot defensive midfielder. He's not the heir to Busquets as Barcelona thought. But I think if you let him drop deep and he's already facing the goal and you go get the ball from this penalty area to the other penalty area, he's one of the best in the world at that. That's a very unique skill. But also, I think another big problem with PSG is, as Tom's alluded to, there's loads of players out there you could buy for 50, 60, 70 million. And yeah, you win the league. Hooray. But also you want to win the Champions League. So how do you get that unicorn player, especially at a time where necessarily if you want to win the Champions League, you don't actually do it by scoring loads of goals. I'm also talking right now, and I cannot tell you what the Swiss format Champions League, how that's going to work tactically, right? That change from a group stage to those
Yeah.
fixed league bits, and then you get into the seeded draw. I don't know the impact that's going to have on tactics. I don't know the impact that's going to have on your approach. Do you want to peak really, really early and then possibly get a very good seeded draw, or is it better to grow through the tournament as well? It seems as if the Swiss format Champions League is going to go out their way to make sure we don't get PSG versus Bayern Munich until the quarterfinals and semi-finals, which makes me sad. But then that probably increases the tension on teams like Bayern Munich and PSG. If you're going to steamroll your domestic league and you're not going to face a team of comparable difficulty or a team that can take 60% possession away from you until April, I'm pulling the face, right? Like, how do you buy a midfielder knowing that midfield is not really going to be important to your season until March?
The departure of Mbappe, this kind of chaotic style player under a very solid, strict Luis Enrique potentially will allow this manager to really show what he can do with this new style PSG once Mbappe leaves, Carl.
Yes, the PSG should be a more coherent team, and we've seen this already as as Messi's left, as Neymar left. The front press is better. They are better at retaining the ball. They are. You can dispute as to whether or not they're more fun to watch, but they make more sense. I think the interesting thing Liam's done there is, you want to throw it forward. Everything is used to describe Mbappe about a player, chaos moments, not taking too many touches. If we are to assume he's going to go to Real Madrid, that makes more sense. You look at Carlo Ancelotti's not a manager of rigid tactical systems anymore. He used to love the 4-4-2, but then as he changed for his time at Parma and AC Milan, became very, very good at just facilitating talent and letting talent blossom. We're seeing Jude Bellingham right now in this false nine-ish system at the top of a midfield three where he pushes up, which is fantastic for Jude Bellingham. But so yes, Mbappe at Real Madrid, chaos player in a team where the manager's not so strict about the zones of control you need to be in, should work. There are also questions as to how does Mbappe work and again, Tom, please yell at me here if I'm wrong. I'm going to assume Vinicius Junior is still going to take the left-hand side. I'm going to assume Bellingham's probably going to be the number 10-ish at Real Madrid. And if you put Mbappe up front as the centre forward, which I think is quite interesting now, if we take Luis Enrique using Mbappe as the 9, could that be interpreted as training Mbappe for Real Madrid, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point, and it's not a point that's been made very much with regards to where Mbappe is playing at the moment. But Luis Enrique is kind of doing him a bit of a favour in putting him through the middle, because that is the only place where he could conceivably slot into the team at Madrid. And I've seen lots of kind of potential Real Madrid starting 11s on Twitter over the last few days. Generally made by breathlessly excited Real Madrid fans, where you've got Vinicius Junior on the left and Rodrigo on the right and Mbappe up front and Bellingham in the number 10 position. I mean, it sounds incredible, but I wonder how workable that would prove to be. And I wonder whether, if Mbappe goes to Madrid, whether they might end up playing with someone like Federico Valverde on the right-hand side, just to try and balance things out. Because I don't think, I mean, I'd love to see it. Like, I would, don't get me wrong, I would love to see a front four of Mbappe, Vinicius, Rodrigo, Bellingham, with a Tchouaméni, Camavinga midfield behind, and Modric and Kroos being rotated in and out.
Stop it, Tom, stop it.
But I wonder about the balance. So yeah, I'm sure that'll be something that Ancelotti has in mind if and when Mbappe ends up.
I think that could work, but it would mean the end of the Bellingham we're currently seeing. I think Bellingham is certainly smart enough.
The goals will dry up for sure.
Certainly talented enough and intelligent enough, and I think physically just a phenomenon to play in a more restrained position as a number 10 and feed Mbappe, and then also attack the spaces where Mbappe drops and takes 2 defenders out. But the Bellingham who's blasting it in the last minute to win a Clasico might go away. Does that make you sad? I don't know. I mean, sub question here, Tom. You described the interesting dynamic, shall we say, between Mbappe when Neymar and Messi were there at PSG. Is that another hidden factor here? You know, Mbappe seemed quite annoyed at times at PSG when there were two other superstars there, and I mean, yet he wants to go to Real Madrid, where I mean, there's always going to be superstars at Real Madrid, right? Is that a problem?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I suppose one thing that probably works in Mbappe's favor is that he was always the junior superstar of the trio, when it came to Neymar and Messi, whereas he would be, he'd be the senior superstar at Madrid. It's, Vinicius Junior and Bellingham who will have to kind of accommodate him. And he is, he is a bigger name. He is probably the biggest superstar in world football currently. So I think, I guess to the extent that he's, got those sorts of considerations in mind already, he's probably thinking, well, I'm going to come in as like, the main man. And that was a status that he kind of had to build for himself at PSG, because he arrives in the shadow of Neymar's arrival, and then Messi arriving, just takes things to a different level altogether. Whereas he's going to be the superstar arriving at Madrid. So I would have thought that will be less of an issue. But in terms of how you fit him into the team, it's on paper at least, it's not entirely straightforward.
Well, fitting him into the team if he leaves is definitely something Luis Enrique doesn't have to worry about. So I'm just thinking, as a coach who's won the Champions League with Barcelona, in terms of this long-term strategy, Tom, you think about the power dynamics that are happening at PSG right now. You've got this bumper player with a fair bit of control now leaving. Manager's literally rubbing his hands going, actually, thank goodness I can make my decisions now. And you can imagine actually the real test of Enrique's tenure at PSG can now be marked once Mbappe leaves.
Yeah, although I guess as a counterpoint to that, Luis Enrique feels like he has more authority than some other more recent PSG coaches, in that he's allowed to publicly criticize Mbappe, which is not something that Christophe Galtier or Mauricio Pochettino would have ever done. He's allowed to bench him. It was Luis Enrique's decision to put PSG on the bench at Nantes at the weekend. I mean, with their conversation with the directors, potentially, but this is a decision that has been explained as something that Luis Enrique decided. And I think his status as, the guy that led Barcelona to the treble, his past as a player gives him a sort of, an authority that other recent PSG coaches haven't had. The message at PSG is this is a new era. We're not obsessed about the Champions League. It's not all about superstars. It's about building something organic. And we think Luis Enrique is the man to do that.
Well, when you think about new eras, then I'm also thinking about new eras for Ligue 1. You lose, in terms of marketing, a global star. I mean, you've lost the Messi, you've lost the Neymar, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. I think Ligue 1 have even struggled to get broadcasting rights for the league in general. I mean, what kind of a loss is this? Firstly, for PSG and their marketing. I know the Jumpman contracts are still going, and they've still got a and they're moving stadium for sure, but also for the league in general.
Yeah, I think in many ways it's potentially a bigger loss for the league than it is for PSG in purely marketing terms, because I think what PSG have succeeded in doing over the last few years is reposition themselves as a lifestyle brand, which is why there is a PSG boutique on Oxford Street, which is mad, which is why you see kids, walking around London with PSG shirts. And
I'm not going to lie, I'm wearing PSG tracksuit bottoms right now.
Yeah, there we go.
People love
midlife crisis. It's fine. Midlife crisis.
The Jordan brand deal. I'm a child of the 90s, and the Jordan brand Jumpman partnership.
Yeah,
very much pushed my buttons, especially after I finished watching The Last Dance. Their partnership with Prince was utterly bizarre. I can't imagine, the artist formerly known as Prince, the artist now known as Prince, the late departed Prince, would be interested in Paris Saint-Germain's footballing project, and yet they've got they had a fruitful partnership all based around the color purple there. It works, pushing PSG as a lifestyle brand, and they are they have done to a degree things that Chelsea have done, to a degree things that Manchester City have done. It's the shift where your fan base goes from getting your shirt with Dad or Kevin on the back to where they go from putting your top striker on the back. And something I pointed out, something that was interesting to me last season, I'm walking around the city of Manchester, was the first time I really saw City shirts with Haaland. Haaland 9 became far and above the top selling City shirt, whereas a lot more times you walked around Manchester the last couple of years, you'd see the brother sponsored City shirt. This is what you have to do to become that sort of global advertising mega power. You've got to get more corporate. You've got to sign these odd deals. You've got to have your football players stood holding some form of condiment in South Korea or in China. And PSG have tapped into that very, very well. And I think, yes, they have the financial backing that few football clubs in the world can do, but they're also made a number of smart footballing decisions off the field. I think we're talking right now about what's their plans for the Champions League and whatnot. I mean, if we're all in agreement they're not going to win the Champions League this year, they intend to win the Champions League next year. #/ footnote. The Super League is always like a latent threat to everything. So, Tom, I know you said that there was a threat of FFP considerations and possibly getting sanctions in Europe. I don't think that's happening, especially when you consider Khalifi's role in UEFA now, post Super League implosion. Like PSG, even after losing Mbappe, PSG are going to be one of the most important clubs in the future of European football between now and the 2030 World Cup.
Yeah, but that brings me to the point. What about Ligue 1? PSG are doing what they need to do as a commercial brand. You still need people to watch the league. You still need people to invest in the league. So it's somewhat a palatable contender to all the other of Europe's top leagues.
Yeah, and I think that's the. So yeah, no, I mean, and I was going to say as Carl was saying, PSG have very successfully repositioned themselves as a lifestyle brand, and I think there's good reason to think that people will carry on buying their merchandise even if the superstars have gone. There are other marketing deals that it will be more difficult to preserve if sponsors know that it's not going to be Mbappe, Messi, Neymar wearing the shirt or whatever. But it's even harder for the league, and there is a domestic TV rights negotiation going on currently. Vincent Lebrun, who is the president of the Ligue de Football Professionnel, has been derided somewhat for having announced the ambition of making €1 billion for domestic and overseas broadcast rights, because the deal that the league struck with MediaPro valued the rights around that figure. Of course, that deal collapsed during the COVID pandemic, and it's the LFP was left to pick up the pieces. It's very hard to sell the league anywhere when you don't have those superstars to point to. There will always be an audience for French football within France, and I think the league will probably get somewhere near the kind of figures they're looking for in terms of domestic TV rights. But France's big problem has been overseas TV rights. That's where it pales by comparison with not just the Premier League, because every other league pales by comparison with the Premier League, but with Serie A, with Bundesliga, with championships that Ligue 1 would like to think it could potentially compete with. It's because people outside France don't want to watch French football. And if they didn't want to watch French football when Mbappe and Messi and Neymar were there, it's hard to see why they would tune in, other than have the goodness of their own heart, when all three of them have gone. So it is potentially a big issue for the French game in a wider sense.
Okay, I think we have to end it there. We've been on here for what, an hour talking Mbappe. I love it, but I think the listeners need a rest. Gents, thanks so much for your time. Tom and Carl, as always, don't forget to rate and review the podcast, and we'll definitely be back tomorrow for another episode. Appreciate you listening. If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anka, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, Search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.